It is therefore critical that we continuously review the tools and instruments we use to deal with this challenge, particularly noting that unemployment has negative long-term consequences for both growth and stability. In its economic stewardship, the ANC has created, implemented, and advanced many policies to reshape the economy, change the structure of opportunity, and benefit the majority. In 1994, 25 years ago, the ANC inherited a country where the majority of South Africans were excluded from participation and opportunities in the mainstream economy. Dismantling the economic and social trajectory created by the apartheid regime and combating the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment continues to be a difficult challenge. But the ANC is the strongest political force in South Africa, and we are committed to meet this challenge. Since our democratic breakthrough in 1994, significant progress has been made in meeting the basic needs of our people, including through the non-racial extension of social security transfers, which had previously been racially discriminatory, though the enactment of labor protections and expanded the social wage, and through accelerated investment in economic and social infrastructure. However, the redistribution of wealth and the growth of job creation industries have not met our expectations. Our election manifesto contains key facts that show how the lives have been improved since ANC took over government in 1994, among others the following. In 1994, only 36% of the population had access to electricity. Today, 8 out of 10, 80% South Africans have their homes electrified. In 1994, only 6 out of 10 South Africans had access to clean drinking water. Today, 9 out of 10, 90% South Africans have access to clean drinking water. Since 1994, over 4.7 million free houses have been built, benefiting over 14 million people. 90% of public schools are now no-fee paying schools and support the poor students at universities and TVET colleges, increased from 70 billion in 1994 to by almost 15 billion rand a year in 2018. The ANC election manifesto's economic focus plots an expansive set of actions which will serve to rebalance economic power in favor of the majority of South Africans. The manifesto crystallizes the ANC's resolutions on economic policy. It aims to address concretely the pressing economic needs of millions in our country who continue to suffer deprivation and to ensure that everybody in South Africa gets a fair share of the benefits of economic development. Our manifesto provides a set of proposed actions across a range of economic policy issues, sectoral issues, trade, macroeconomic, regulatory, and environmental issues. It pays particular attention to strategies that are aimed at poor growth, reversal of underdevelopment, promotion of sustainable livelihoods, and providing firm foundation for the economy in the era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. These policy interventions would need to be complemented by catalytic actions on the part of the state, through all spheres of government and relevant state-owned entities. The organizing principle behind the manifesto is that economic outcomes must overwhelmingly create jobs, eradicate poverty, and reduce inequality. A key component of this principle is the need to demonstrate responsible stewardship over the country's resources through growth, clean governance, innovation, and empowerment. We acknowledge that many economic problems continue to be based on the structure of inequality and underdevelopment inherited from South Africa's colonial and apartheid past. Certain other problems are more conjunctural in nature, such as low levels of growth and investment, reduced business confidence, limited fiscal space, and ongoing shortage of electricity, the threat of job losses in mining, metals, and other sectors, and drought conditions. As a result, the ANC, through our manifesto, as well as other interventions such as those outlined in President Ramaphosa's Stimulus and Recovery Plan, is putting forward measures to accelerate growth and intensify our program of economic transformation. The intensification of our interventions on the economy will form an integral part of our poor path, uniting all South Africans to promote growth and development. At our last conference, we adopted a program of radical economic transformation with clear goals to, among other things, to increase employment, especially for youth, and build a more inclusive economy, redistribute and return land to black people, including using the tool of land expropriation without compensation, and provide state support to help new farmers. Increase black ownership and participation in all sectors of the economy. Particular attention in this instance needs to be paid in mobilizing financial resources to enable this participation. Raise investment and savings rates to stimulate growth. Improve social justice for poor people and better conditions for workers. Improve the employment impact of infrastructure projects and projects by state-owned companies. Break down monopoly practices and structures that exclude new, small, and/or black business, and better use of the Competition Commission to open the economy, enable the entrance of new players, unlock the latent potential, and disincentivize some historical practices by dominant groups. Make finance for small business more accessible and use state spending to buy mostly from South African business and much more from small and black-owned businesses. Introduce a minimum wage which came into force from the beginning of this year to lift the income of the working poor, as well as promote worker empowerment through share ownership and profit-sharing schemes. Government has already begun to address some of these issues that will help us resolve economic development issues. These include dealing with the high concentration and anti-competitive behavior within the South African economy through the recent Competition Amendment Bill. We have also taken a conscious effort to promote good governance in our SOEs to ensure their resources are focused to achieve the objectives for which they exist, and that they play their real catalytic role in the economy. Fiscal management that is biased towards growth, in particular to support productive activities while dealing with any legacy challenges needed to stabilize the state and its agencies. Accelerate land reform program that promotes development and sustainability. We've seen broad support, both locally and international, for land and agrarian reform that not only deals with the historical legacies in a manner that is consistent with the Constitution, but also adds to the further development of the economy, including positively impact food security. Some of our manifesto priorities have found their expression in the 2019 budget, anchored on the need to achieve a higher rate of economic growth and reconfiguring state-owned enterprises. In this year's budget, the word infrastructure appears almost 10 times in the budget speech. However, due to the country's current debt profile and fiscal measures, infrastructure expenditure will remain below the target set in the National Development Plan, which is 10% of GDP. We will be spending $865 billion on public infrastructure over the next 3 years. As we succeed in reconfiguring the state, improve its capacity to deliver, stabilize state-owned enterprises, and deal decisively with corruption, we expect to see more incremental impacts on resource towards infrastructure. Our investment plan aims to increase the levels of investment by 1.3 trillion over the next 4 years to grow our economy and increase jobs. We will create public-led infrastructure fund to build more roads, schools, health facilities, water and sanitation infrastructure, transport networks, ICT system, and energy generation and distribution capacity. Just to back up this thing, we'll just throw in some stats from UNCTAD. Last month, UNCTAD published World Investment Report 2018. This report points out the following. Global FDI in 2020 fell by 23% to 1.43 trillion. Greenfields fell by 14%. Against this background of falling FDI global, the very same UNCTAD report indicates that FDI into South Africa went up from 1.3 in 2017 to $7.1 billion in 2018, an increase of 446%, which means our objectives are realizable on the investment front. Indeed, what we managed to do through the investment drive was to back the global investment trend. Given that the stress-tested figures from investment conference recorded commitments of 290 billion rand, or roughly $20 billion US, this means that in a few short months, investment drive has succeeded in achieving a remarkable turnaround, not just in sentiment, but in actual concrete action by both foreign and domestic investors. The importance of the investment drive is that we will see the building of new productive capacity that will create more jobs. The ANC-led drive is reflected in outcomes of improved job numbers we saw in the fourth quarter, as reflected in latest Stats SA employment data. Employment increased by 149 in the fourth quarter, a quarter-on-quarter increase, and by 358 year-on-year, which means if you take the figures from last year and this year, the employment increased by 358,000. The unemployment rate declined to 27.1 in quarter four. This is still too high, but for the first time in a long time, we're moving in the right direction. The bulk of the total 865 billion expenditure on infrastructure over the next 3 years will be undertaken by state-owned enterprises at 39% of that, which is 339 billion of total infrastructure spending, followed by local government at 24% and provincial departments at 21%. Infrastructure remains a key element for us, not just because it helps in delivery of services, but has multiple economic impacts, both in related industry, but also in labor-absorbing capacity of the construction sector. It is a matter of high priority to the ANC that we take concrete steps to accelerate interventions that will help the country step out of the low-growth trap, accelerate land reform, reduce inequality, improve employment, restore confidence in our management of fiscal resources, as well as build popular confidence in our ability to stabilize and transform South Africa's economy. This will enable us to improve the economic circumstances of our people through a sustainable program of radical social and economic transformation as envisaged in the National Development Plan. The 2019 budget took the following manifesto imperatives into consideration. One, the importance to regain fiscal prudence as a foundation towards the path to economic recovery and renewal. Two, the restructuring of state-owned enterprise to perform optimally and ensure that their boards and management are incentivized to improve the conditions of the SOEs than simply want to get support from the state. Three, highlighted a number of areas of increased coordination to enable the state to provide certainty on the policy trajectory. Furthermore, the budget speech took into consideration the fulfillment of priorities as determined by the President and also identified in the manifesto, namely investment in the economy to advance inclusive economic growth and foster and increase employment, improve the education system and deliver skills that are currently required and those that will be necessary in the future. Three, ameliorate living conditions for all, particularly the poor, through increasing the funds allocated to social security, ameliorate of health services, increase access to housing, expansion of economic infrastructure. In addition, combat corruption and state capture and restore the integrity and confidence in the public institutions and state-owned enterprises. and improving the capacity of the state to deliver and renewing a capable and developmental state. That concludes the statement, but what we have done for your purpose, the statement we have included an addendum on areas we think would be of interest to the public and to the media, so that we don't have to read a long statement. You may ask questions both on the statement and on the addenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Enoch. Did our colleagues get the statement? Can they get copies so that they can ask questions? Colleagues, we'll start now with the questions. What we'll allow is that each and every one of us can raise their hands. You'll be given a tag number, then immediately introduce yourself and introduce the media outlet where you come from. So we can start now with the questions. It's number one. It's only one. Number two. All right, no, let's start with this round. Maybe you're still going through the statement. Number three. Okay, number one, you can start. Where's the mic? Where's the mic? Okay, you can start.
By the former Minister of Finance, what's your position on that as the Economic Conservation Subcommittee? And the second question relates to the reserve bank. What's your posture exactly? Why do you speak more about the independence of the South African Reserve Bank as opposed to its nationalization? What's the difference between two? How would the nationalization of the Reserve Bank affect its independence? Then the last question is on the expectation without compensation. On this particular matter, the president of the ANC of the country.
What is the third question?
No.
The president always speaks about the rapid release of government land. Did your policy on expropriating land include just releasing government land and not touching the land that is in the hands of the private sector, which Lamula, the ANC member, always speaks about, asking those who own huge hectares of land to release them? When will you be starting to expropriate any land probably owned by what you always refer to as the Stellenbosch mafia? And also, the last question on Eskom. What's your stance on Eskom? What is this restructuring? Is selling Eskom or what's going on? Thank you.
Number two.
Morning. My name is Zangisa from the Sunday Times. Well, actually, the same with his last question, he sort of stole my question, which was going to be that critical to economic, to the economy is fully functional our utility. And we know that Eskom is far from that at this point in time, but I didn't hear much, from Mr. Kodoma touching into the issue. And also on that, it seems like the ANC is being held at ransom, so to speak, by its coalition government partners, the SACP and COSATU, who seem not to be pleased by some of the issues that are going on there, including the unbundling. And also, in the bigger scheme of things, this reconfiguration of the alliance. What is the issue there? Because it seems like that is the card that the coalition partners, SSCP and COSATU, are using to hold you guys at ransom. And does that not disrupt what you are trying to do in implementing the resolutions of Nazareth? Also, secondly, Mr. Kodobani, you spoke about the commitment to self-correction, self-renewal, and issues like that. Isn't the ANC not concerned that some of its leaders, are always involved in all sorts of allegations against them. Does that come in the path of trying to implement the resolutions of Nazareth and trying to push the ANC policy going forward? I mean, who know what of the revelations that came yesterday? I mean, not long after there had been similar allegations against the senior leaders of the ANC. Isn't that compromising the ANC and its image and reputation in the eyes of the public, especially going into the elections? Thank you very much.
Number 3.
Good morning. My name is Ndego Okobo. I'm with the SAPC. That forum, and I've seen the statement, it's very comprehensive. Yes, I've seen the statement, it's very comprehensive. But I would want to know, are there any sort of alternative empowerment model that the agency is considering? I'm saying this against the backdrop of the evidence that is laid out there. South Africa, right now, we're very distinct. We're a very distinct country in the West. I think people on the social welfare are more than people that are working, but more people on the welfare system as opposed to people in employment. Again, we're the most unequal society. Are there any sort of empowerment models that you consider? Everyone in this room, I think, would agree that black economic empowerment is good. Everyone would support that. But are you likely to tinker with some of the aspects of black empowerment, black economic empowerment, just to make sure that everyone benefits out of this scheme? And on the renewal project, well, perceptions are perceptions, but once they get repeated over and over again, they become reality in our minds. The perception is out there that it seems the renewal is aimed at a certain section in the ANC, sort of sidelining those that you think are not really part of the collective whatever. Is this renewal really aimed at hedging or dealing with those that at some point were not supporting the cause? I think for now that's my solution.
Yes, we'll then allow members of the panel to answer to respective questions that have been asked. Immediately after that, we'll go to the second round of questions. We'll open again. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. As part of the discussion amongst ourselves, there are powers vested in me to direct certain questions to some of my colleagues. I will do that at the appropriate time. Let me just say, who was asking this nationalization debate? Yes, something. There's better somebody to explain this thing nicely, sitting at the back there. I listened to his debate when he, among other things, he said there's too much economic illiteracy. We can distinguish between a number of things in the we're confusing a number of things in the debate. As part of that, I'm trying to attempt to follow in his footsteps and try and grapple with this question. We have said we will nationalize. If you look at the formulation, we said it's a historical anomaly, the ownership of the Reserve Bank to be in private hands, because there are about only 7 of them in the world, particularly after the Second World War. The rest of central banks have become in public hands. That talks to one aspect of the respect, in the ownership aspect. If you look at the Constitution, that aspect is not dealt with in the Constitution. All right? That aspect is not dealt with in the Constitution. We can do it, nationalize the Reserve Bank, place it into public hands, redress the historical anomaly. Okay? That's what we've characterized it. Now, we've made a rider there. There's some work which is being done. We've made a rider, and that rider we should not unduly enrich speculators as part of that discussion. So you will understand that the strategy that's being taken is such a manner that is sensitive to that issue. That work, I'm not at liberty to go into detail on that work. But it's work that's being done, but sensitive to those issues. There's the independence of the Reserve Bank with respect to its functioning. Okay? It does not relate to the ownership. It's quite important that we draw this distinction quite clearly. That relates to its functioning. But before I go to in detail, even that functioning is distinct, there's different areas. There's a broad debate about monetary policy direction. Whether in pursuing of its monetary policy, it should give preference to focusing purely on inflation, irrespective of what is happening on the growth and unemployment. Interest rates are basically a blunt instrument sometimes. So that debate has been going on in public and in the ANC. All right? And globally, for that matter, interesting enough, I've quoted one day a paper by some IMF economist, chief economist Blanchard, in which they say, rethinking macroeconomics, in which they are beginning to grapple with this question of the balance between employment and inflation. And that debate is there, worldwide is there in South Africa. We had an intense debate between 2007 and 2010, even in the ANC. With that background, you will see that in the budget statement in 2010, in the budget, tabling his budget in 2010, Minister Pravin Gordhan then wrote to the Reserve Bank and said, in addition to all other priorities you will have to take employment into account. And that is it. Now, that's the second part of the debate around the Reserve Bank. The third element is what instruments to deploy as part of that. And in order to decide whether to use an interest rate, whether to use any other instrument, is what is called the instrument independence of the Reserve Bank. We have no intention whatsoever of interfering with that one. But we must be at liberty, like all South Africans, to debate whether the monetary policy is in the direction that is making impact on the economy. That is important. I must make the point that, for instance, inflation targeting was not a Reserve Bank policy. It was a government policy which was imposed on the Reserve Bank as part of the monetary policy discourse. So I think we should not be making all of the unnecessary things about it. Rapid land, we've got Mr. Land Expropriation next to me. He will talk to you about that. In terms of ESCOM and the political kind of discussion amongst ourselves, an interesting thing, we tend to be raising things as if they are new. I want to take you to the unbundling thing. I want to take a step back and take you to 1998. In 1998, government made published what is called the White Paper. Right? The White Paper said electricity in South Africa electricity generation will be 70% ESCOM and 30% private entities. In between, no regulatory framework was created for private industries to participate, and therefore no investment. Hence, they were forced ESCOM to start a new build in 2004, and as a result, we had the outages we had in 2004, or was it 2004, 2008? So there has been this discussion for some time of that. That's the start of the discussion. But a second start of the discussion was in 2009, when we were saying, how are we going to transition to a low carbon economy? And during that discussion, we reach consensus as a society, by the way. It was not an ANC discussion, which led to the IRP 2010, which was a policy which we made saying what is going to be the generation mix in South Africa. In that generation mix, we included renewables, we included nuclear. I can see why people are making a noise about it. We can talk about the price of it, but it was part of that mix. We agreed on that. Having agreed on that, and then government embarked on renewables and some of it from by private sector. A second step government took in following up was in 2012. They placed what was called ISMO Bill. Is it nice that I take you guys through this memory lane so that you understand we're not reinventing the wheel? And the ISMO Bill's intention was to separate generation from transmission. And everybody agreed other than the ANC. We were the ones who said, look guys, hold on. We need to wrap our minds as what is going to be the end state of ESCOM. And the ISMO Bill was at that point. So the restructuring debate is not something new. It's part of that discourse. But let me take you back. There's also the same thing with the distribution. At some point, distribution from ESCOM and municipalities, there was an intention to put it under a company called EDI and the RADs. So this discussion is not something new discussion. There has been discussion on to how best to manage the electricity industry in South Africa. So part of that discussion, which has taken place into the alliance discussion, has been this restructuring of separation of it's not new, of separation of transmission from generation. It's not new. So some of the alliance partners have been taken on board in the discussion in 2 alliance meetings. COSATU then said, okay, fine, we would like to pursue in detail with the Minister of Energy the impact of the IPPs. That's a discussion which is taking place between them at the moment. I thought I should because this matter is too much in the domain, I should go into much detail to explain the big background. Allegation against leaders, I would have thought that we focus on economic matters today. But however, I want to point out that no organization would not be worried with that. Okay? Any organization would be worried about that. But for God's sake, ANC members, like all other South Africans, are entitled to due process. One of the difficulties I have with the discourse is something that says, no, without any discourse, something must happen to them. I think that's the fundamental weakness of the discourse. We're not saying anybody must not happen anything, but I'm saying we're all worried about those allegations. On the empowerment models, there are 2 issues you've raised in one contribution. The first one is the unemployment issue. The second one is the black economic empowerment in one question. Let me deal with those separately. We are making a point in this submission that one of our key focus is going to be ensure that we make an implant on unemployment. Unemployment, if you look, it's an accepted phenomenon. Unemployment is also contributing negatively to, it contributes to poverty, it contributes to inequality. Even if you read states essays, you'll see the states essays say major contributor to poverty is unemployment. So dealing with unemployment indirectly will deal with poverty. So that's an important point we want to focus on. In terms of black economic empowerment, obviously, you can't hope that government will have the answers. To think that government will have the answers is a mistake. We would like that black bodies and black professionals and everybody who are experiencing, we've got interesting views on how the change should take place, should be the ones who give us ideas. We would like to have ideas from the public, because you're not going to expect people who do not know the unintended. You see, when you implement a policy, there are unintended consequences which we don't know. For instance, one of those unintended consequences has been fronting. But unless somebody brings that to the attention of government, nobody would know. So that's what we would like to... what was the last question from you? Lamola, you'll take that. And anyone wants to add on another question? What was the last question? I didn't capture it properly. Oh, renewal. Oh, this person says renewal. Renewal is not, it's a renewal by everybody in the ANC. It's not a renewal. You're factionalizing an important term. You're factionalizing because renewal is about how to renew the movement and renew ourselves in terms of our commitment to the values of the system of the movement. It's not about any factional issue. But any addition? Rob and
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Comrade Enoch, and to the members of the media. I think maybe to start where Comrade Enoch stopped with regard to the BE and what is our commitment. In the manifesto, we have put it very clear that we will obviously have to look into ensuring that this broad-based black economic empowerment benefits all South Africans. And in that regard, we'll look at some of the provisions of the PFMA that have been raised by what Comrade Enoch says, some of the black professionals and the industry, which inhibits some of the intended objectives of the black economic empowerment. One of the issues relates to set aside, which is not covered for by the PFMA. So those are some of the issues that we're looking into ensuring that this economic empowerment really goes to help, particularly some of the small businesses across the country. With regard to the question that Mr. Masego has asked, sometimes I say, if government will want to if government may be scared of any form of label, the ANC government is not going to do anything. It will be paralyzed by analysis, because when the government says we are proceeding to give land, the one that we have, government is criticized for protecting the private sector. And when government says now we're proceeding to expropriate from the private sector, government is criticized for saying you want to collapse the economy. So in either way, government has a responsibility of a balancing act in society and ensure that whatever government does is in the interest of the people of South Africa. And I think that is the purpose of the Constitution, to mediate and ensure that the Constitution and how government functions is in the interest of all South Africans. So in regard to when are we going to start this expropriation, and I also sometimes say, there's also an expectation or an understanding or misconception in society that when people are going to start a race, say sugile much. But the reality is that government since 1994 has been handing over land. And one of the things that government has done is to expropriate. Government has been expropriating since we have come into power, including the apartheid government. But the difference with the government's expropriation has been that it was expropriating with compensation. And the expropriation with compensation has been market value. The building of house trains in the country was one of the biggest expropriation. You will remember the houses and so forth that has been expropriated. But it was expropriated at market value. The Land Claims Commissioner has also expropriated. It's not like there's never been an expropriation from the Land Claims Commission. There has been expropriation, and they've given some few cases where they've done the expropriation. And the difference is that the expropriation was done at market value, informed by the 1975 Expropriation Act, which takes you to the market value. And what the ANC conference has said is that we need to review where we have to expropriate, that the expropriation must be just and equitable. It must be in line with what the Constitution says. And in this regard, the Department of Public Works has now published a bill. I know it has been criticized. Others were saying they were already on holiday in Mauritius. Others have already left wherever they were, so they could not really read the bill. But the bill was published and any comment was supposed to be filled up until now, which is giving enough time, including those that went to holiday, those that could not access Wi-Fi wherever they were. So there was enough space for anyone to make a contribution to the expropriation bill. But what the expropriation bill does, it lays the principles and the circumstances under which expropriation without compensation is going to happen. You may criticize it for whatever, but there is a space for you to strengthen the bill and say, this is what I think it should do, and this is how it should be done. And we have also said to the department, they should need to look at it to make sure that at least the expropriation can happen as quickly as possible within the terrains of that bill, which they are going to re-strengthen to ensure that it resolves some of the expropriation issues. And in this regard, one of the issues with regard to the rapid land release. Why are we saying there must be rapid land release? It did not start now. It started in 2011. There has been a process of rapid land release across the country. And even in 2018, after the Nazareth resolution, the impetus was put more on this issue to say government must do more. And most of you will have seen the president handing over the Mkwanazi claim in KwaZulu-Natal. There have been various land handovers across the country. And there will be a lot more from March. Massive, rapid land release in strategically located areas. And the land that is going to be released is indeed some of it land of government, but in some of the areas, it's land that the private sector is saying is donating or is handing over to government to hand over. And this is not some useless land. One of the most well strategically located land will be released in the area of Rustenburg. In the main area of Rustenburg, where people will be close to where they work in the mines and where close to where they can be able to go to the city, access to various amenities. And this is a very good model and example because the private sector and the Rustenburg local municipality, they have come together, joined together, they've put bulk infrastructure, water, roads, and everything in partnership with those that might have donated the land. So this is going to be done across the country. It's not only the government land that is going to be released. Where we have got the powers, we have said government because it has got power, it must lead by example. It must release the land where we have it, where we can be able to put our people next to where they want to access amenities of life, which include employment, towns, and various amenities that they need to access to. But we have also said where private sector has got the land which government may need or which they are willing to provide. There has been very good South Africans who have already approached government through the interministerial committee, saying we have got land which we believe your people can use, and this is how we can help this process. So, angeke kube nemfingwana maseko ezoshaya ukuthi seyisukile. Isukile njengoku. It already is happening, and you will see more of that happening because it is in the interest of the country. And I know we are always accused that when we hand over these land parcels or when government is delivering, we are accused of electioneering. I always say, Comrade David, if this land issue was indeed an electioneering issue, not an important national imperative, the PAC will have been government since 1994. People forget that in 1994, when the ANC came into power, the PAC was the one talking about the land every day. But the PAC never became government of the day. So it's not true that the ANC is handling the land issue because there is pressure. The ANC is handling the land issue because it's a national imperative, it's an important social issue that needs to be addressed, it's an important economic imperative that needs to be addressed. It is in that context that the ANC is approaching the land question. Thank you.
Comrade Lindy, followed by Comrade Rob.
Thank you very much. I think we need to start from a perspective that says everything that is being discussed here and every summary of the different sectors that the African National Congress is focusing on will address the issue of black economic empowerment. For us in the department and following what the ANC is talking about, we believe that we have to continue to deal with the changing of the structure of the economy of South Africa. And if we don't deal with that, it will be very difficult for us to find solutions of ensuring that the black economic empowerment we're talking about moves forward. And therefore, it's important for us to recognize the importance of working together, both government, civil society, private sector, and in particular private sector. Because when private sector continues to say there is a trust deficit, we need to say back to the private sector, let's work together. If there is a trust deficit, let's work together to deal with that. From a perspective of black economic empowerment, I think there's got to be a recognition of the fact that we need the capacity of the state to be able to assist those that want to be empowered with the rights and necessary support that they need to get. So if you talk about black economic and empowerment, you're looking at, from a perspective of small business development, what is it that we are doing as government to empower your small and medium enterprises? And when you talk about the land that we're talking about, it's about the land being given to your smallholder farmers, but not just giving them the land, but ensuring that you give them the necessary support. And I think I'd like to also ask you guys sometimes to come with us to some of these places, for you to see how young people in particular. I'm here, I traveled from Mpumalanga this morning. Yesterday I spent the whole day in Mpumalanga, and it's amazing how you go out and find young people who are finding solutions, young people who many have spent their times in Johannesburg, and they discovered that while they are in Johannesburg, it's useless to hang around in Johannesburg. They've gone back to the land because the government is saying, here is the land. These are young people who have got degrees and a whole range of capacity in the farming, where the young people are saying, we want you, government, to come along and help us. Because addressing the issue of black economic empowerment must not be seen as a solution that would have happened from 1994 to now, and that's it. I am a Minister of Small Business Development, and I'm telling you, I wake up in the morning feeling very excited about the young people that I come across who are wanting to work as hard as they possibly can, and all they are asking for, they're saying, government, create the conducive environment for us to be able to work for ourselves. 2, government, make sure that you remove the obstacles and the red tape that makes it difficult for us to even access the opportunities within government. 3, they are saying, government, coordinate your efforts. And I think from all aspects of government, they're saying coordinate your efforts so that from national, provincial, and local structures, we are able to access these opportunities. And if you look at the sectors that have been identified by the ANC, you'll see those key sectoral areas which have been identified in the addendum: your oil and gas, energy, transport, information and communication, tourism, and the creative industries and so forth. As a Department of Small Business Development, we see the opportunities here for SMMEs. The bottom line is that what do you do to make sure that those SMMEs have the real access to these opportunities that we are talking about? So I do believe that in empowering those need to be empowered, we need to make sure that we create a conducive environment from a legislative point of view, from a regulatory point of view. Here's another issue coming from Mpumalanga again. Going out to the outskirts of Mpumalanga, I found that in the deepest corners, you have the people who are owning your spaza shops and all, and it's just amazing how much of that space is being occupied. And if we don't wake up to the reality of saying, what do we do to help our own to be able to be the ones that occupy that space, we're going to be in trouble as South Africa. And I think we need to be honest and frank and real because our people on the ground are the ones who are saying, why is it that these plaza shops are being owned by people who come from somewhere else? And we say to them, there's got to be a difference between you saying foreign nationals who are legal and foreign nationals who are illegal. There's got to be a difference between you saying those that are operating illegally in the areas where they are operating and those that are operating legally. And so from the Department of Trade and Industry to the Department of Small Business Development to the Department of Economic Development, we need to put our heads together and say, how do we address this particular issue, because it is causing problems in our space. Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come in on two issues. First of all, I was actually the chair of the subcommittee of the Constitutional Assembly that sat between 94 and 96 and developed the phrases and language on the terms of the Reserve Bank. So I wanted to come in with just one observation on that to elaborate on the point made by Comrade Enoch. At the time, there was a distinction made between what was called goal and operational independence. So goal independence is the overall policy direction, the strategic focus, the monetary policy stance of the country. And actually the Constitution never provided that the Reserve Bank would have goal independence. The goals of the Reserve Bank were to be set in the interactions with the minister responsible for finance and in the mandating process, and that is the way it works. So whether we have narrow inflation targeting, broader inflation targeting, whether employment is a consideration, that is dealt with in that process, and that is a process where it's a legitimate policy discussion. What we gave independence for was operational independence, which basically says that, and we were told by National Party colleagues who were sitting in the committee at the time, that in the past the Reserve Bank, when it came to elections, they wouldn't raise interest rates because that would be unpopular for the government in power. And that then afterwards it was a problem because they had to raise them much more afterwards. And we've agreed to give them operational independence. How they make a decision in the Monetary Policy Committee, if they decide, as they did once unsuccessfully under former Governor Stals, to deploy reserves to try to defend the value of the currency, that's no area the government should get involved in, but nor should any kind of private sector institution that wants to short the value of the rand, for example. So I think that's the distinction that's there in the Constitution. Then I wanted to just say that on empowerment, I think that there's been an attempt, maybe not as robust as it could be. There's been an attempt in the 2013 Act and in the new codes to try to turn the tilt of BEE towards supporting black people involved in running their own enterprises in the productive economy. That's been the tilt. So that there has been sub-minima required to achieve a score on the code, sub-minima required for what's called supplier development. So if a company wants to earn points for BEE and is not involved in procuring from black-owned companies in its supply chain at a certain level, it will be penalized. And likewise for skills development. So the things that count in the real economy. The other thing that was established was a BEE commissioner that's looking at fronting. And I can tell you that there's a significant and serious amount of fronting in South Africa, which has become much more sophisticated than it used to be. It deprives black people of the benefits, but it also creates a lot of space for rent-seeking, abuse. It's linked to seeking tender opportunities and stuff like that. And the Commissioner is acting now on a number of those cases and has a mandate to act. But I would say that probably one of the most successful empowerment programs that we've got is the Black Industrialist Program. We've now supported 131 black industrialists. And those are people that I would put my hand over my heart and say the vast majority of them at any rate, the best of them at any rate, are serious industrialists, people who have used the opportunities of our democracy to acquire the skills, the experience, the knowledge of industrial production and are getting into productive activities. And you know, I said in my budget vote last year we'd have an engagement with them, and I had that engagement. And we said that in our program, we would pick some of the best and we would give them more money. And they turned around and they said, we don't want your money. We want you to deliver on other things. We want you to buy the stuff we produce. That's what a number of them said to us. And that turns to the issue of localization. We've had our localization has not worked as well as it should have done. So now we are tightening up localization. That when we buy as government, we will buy from local manufacturers in South Africa, including from black industrialists. They also have pointed out all sorts of other anomalies and issues that have arisen. And I think it's to address those. But one of them is that if we want people to become active and players in the real economy in supply chains, and those supply chains are all totally and utterly monopolized by the same old boys club that's always been there, that's a problem. And that's where the new Competition Act comes in. That where those supply chains are monopolized to the disadvantage of new entrants in supply chains, they will now be taken, there will be action to address that. Now, I think I can't actually leave the platform without saying something. Yesterday, there were a bunch of people with blue shirts that were launching something. And they said on this issue, can you see my glasses? And they said on this matter, you know what they said? They said they don't agree with the ANC's BEE. It's just about enriching a few people. I've been trying to say it's not about that. It's actually, we're trying to turn it in a different direction. But what did they say they were going to come up with? They said that they will approach BEE by 1, codifying specific metrics which will signify successful redress. Can anybody tell me what that means? That's just a jumble of words, which means we cannot agree about BEE among ourselves. We will never be in government and have to take a decision about it. Therefore, we can just throw some words together that will mean anything to everybody, and actually we'll do nothing about it. That's what that says. And I think that any kind of idea of trying to promote inclusivity in our economy has got to grapple with this issue of participation, ownership, and involvement in the economy of this country. And I would just say to you that it doesn't look like there's anything coming from those fellows anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade. Rob will call in now Comrade Nkenge. Comrade Nkenge is our chair of the subcommittee of communication.
Yeah,
tell us about the spectrum and the data must fall.
No, if there are no questions on spectrum, then I'm not going to talk. But I just want to talk about something. Comrade Rob reminded me of, in 1994, I spent 9 years there in Parliament. In 1994, we passed the Constitution. 1996, we passed the Constitution, right? Because I want to deal with this issue of independence and nationalization. The Constitutional Court made an important ruling at that time. It defined the parameter in which you measure what is independence, right? And not only that, I can also remind you that there is an important legal framework around the issue of the independence of the judiciary. There is you need to go into it, because this is a briefing, we can elaborate on some of these issues. Maduna vis-a-vis the magistrates. There was one intervention that was done by Maduna, it was taken on review, and there was a ruling on this thing called independence. So independence is not new when we talk about the Reserve Bank. The SABC, again, in the Constitution, a determination of independence. What is an independent body? So we're not talking about something that is fashionable today. You know, our manifesto, unlike other manifestos, and Comrade Rob talked about yesterday's manifesto, and we have seen the other one with the red berets and so on, is that we cannot afford to be populist. Ours is a seamless transition. We are offering South Africans a seamless transition, not experimenting with their lives and all that. We have a 25-year story to tell, and that 25-year story is all about political stability. Everything else that we are doing is to ensure that there is political stability in the country. We stabilize the institutions of government. In our manifesto, we talk about we talk about the skilled workforce, the area of education. Those are the things that we're talking about, be it ESCOM. So, for instance, if you talk about ESCOM, you must talk about the engineers that are running ESCOM. Where are they going to come from? Our manifesto seeks to deal with that particular area. Our manifesto also talks about the experience of the last 25 years. We are saying we need a more a clear legal and regulatory framework. Everybody must work together, because there are challenges in as far as working in silos are concerned. So you are going to see a government that is pulling everything else together. For instance, the issue of data and how we address it. It is no longer an ICASA issue. It's an issue that is also dealt with by the competition authorities. For instance, the issue of how to deal with monopolies, right? Let me give you a background again, and it relates to ESCOM, right? But there is a lesson from our sector itself. Telkom, like ESCOM, was a natural monopoly. Now, what happened to Telkom? We gave Telkom an objective. We said to them, you need to roll out into the rural areas. And what did we say? Telkom came back to government and said, we are unable to deal with this issue on our own. We need strategic players to work with us in order to roll out services into the rural areas, right? What about the issue of voice? Telkom was challenging as far as voice is concerned. Voice is, so if you look at the telcos, right? They are not different. It's all about infrastructure, right? Competition and all that. They are not different from ESCOM itself, and how you deal with the last mile, for instance. It's all about in as far as Telkom is concerned, ESCOM is concerned. ESCOM is unable to deal with the last mile. There is a problem there. It's made up of engineers. It's skewed towards the engineering faculty and so on. But the last mile is about customers. It's about ESCOM will not know how to go to a customer and say to them, pay for the services that you receive. So we can't continue with a model that is not working, right? So we have learned from the telcos that there is a way of maintaining government ownership in the sector without stifling competition. So there has to be competition in order for many of the social problems to be addressed and so on. So I was just standing up to say the issue of independence we have dealt with, and we can elaborate more on its history and so on. But there is a determination as far as our constitution is concerned. So when we say the Reserve Bank is independent, we have lessons in the last 25 years on the issue of independence. And secondly, the area of where ESCOM is going, we have already dealt with a natural monopoly called Telkom. So go back into how we dealt with the issue of telecoms and competition. There are lessons to be learned there in as far as energy is concerned.
Some more questions.
Yes. No, thank you very much, Comrade Chair. We'll now allow the second round of questions, which will be the last one, because we need to allow South Africans to proceed with their normal life. Today it's Sundays, there are Sunday sessions and other things, so we must release them to go and watch soccer, parenting, and do other social responsibilities. That goes with being a South African. So we'll allow the second round. Can we get the hands? Comrade CD will be number one. Comrade Naki. I call you comrades, colleagues from the media. Sorry. The problem is that you are in a revolutionary house, so we normally refer to each other as comrades. You'll be number two. Sam Kelo will be number three. Any other hand? This is the last session that we allow. In that order, number 1, 2, and 3. The panel here will take those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. CD Madia from News 24. I just wanted to maybe challenge or get more clarity from Enoch specifically about some of the comments you made. Look at the Reserve Bank. You speak about economic literacy. As the ANC, do not look at where that stems from, because the confusion in society and in the media, in essence, comes from the ANC and its leaders who aren't singing from the same hymn sheet, as far as that's concerned. And then the issue of unbundling ESCOM as well. You know, you've given us a history lesson, but it feels like, and I think it's a question somebody asked about the alliance, you know, and the reconfiguration. It also feels like you haven't actually given us an answer beyond, you know, there've been talks. The only issue Constitution seems to have with the IPPs. They're not saying that to the media, they're saying other things. So I just wanted you to look at that. And then the last question is around ETOs. I think I was going to ask about the DA and the BE, but I think we've got that answer. My other question is about ETOs. So you've got Gauteng writing open letters, you know, fighting for ETOs to be removed. Then you've got the finance minister saying, in essence, that can't be done. You've got the transport minister saying, in essence, that can't be done. I'm making the manifesto that was delivered in January, and it didn't really sit and say much about ETOs, though I know that your volunteers must have answers when they're doing door-to-doors. What is the position by the ANC now on ETOs? Thank you.
Yeah, you will excuse my voice because I have got a bit of flu. My name is Eric Naki from the Citizen newspaper. I just want to know, the NDP, National Development Plan, has been there for a long time now, and it envisages infrastructure development as a catalyst for economic growth and job creation. And yet, in the last 5 years or so, there has been a drop in the development of infrastructure in terms of construction, especially civil projects. That is what the construction industry has been complaining about, that there has been a drop in the civil projects. The projects were postponed, projects were cancelled over the last few years. Are we likely to see now, the next period, a situation where there is South Africa is turned into a big construction site? Are we likely to see infrastructure provision being taken seriously this time, so as to create these jobs that we have been talking about, these jobs that are being envisaged in the NDP?
My question is directed to Ngeni. With regards to the issue of ESCOM, what is actually the end game of unbundling? If you're saying that there must be, for instance, you reference telecom having strategic sectors, is it not a coincidence that this unbundling of ESCOM, and particularly when you go to the IPPs, companies that are indirectly linked to Patrice Motsepe end up getting some of these IPP projects? Does that not fuel this speculation of favoritism or nepotism of him benefiting solely on the basis that his brother-in-laws are in government, one as a minister, another as a president? And then the issue of land expropriation without compensation. Lamula, you say it's been there in progress and so on and so forth. What then happens to the land that is held in tribal trusts or like Ingonyama Trust, for instance? Kalema Motlanthe referred to the last 40 days that said that land must be taken away from them. The ANC was very coy on how it handles that issue. How do you then make sure that Samkelo living in Deep Run in Kubundu has the title deed and owns that land and can't wake up tomorrow and have the local chief tell him, you must leave this particular area as I own the land, it's administered by Ingonyama Trust? Are you not letting down your core constituency in the rural areas when you speak about the issue of land, that they don't own that land, they don't have any title deeds to that land? What has then changed from the ANC? In 2012, if I'm not mistaken, you rejected land expropriation without compensation. Years later on, after the expulsion of the Youth League, you adopt this policy. Then you say you're not being populist. Yet you accuse the EFF indirectly
of being populist? Are you not practicing double standards and being populist yourself because of your dwindling electoral fortunes? Thank you.
No, thank you very much.
Was that the last one?
Yeah, that was the last one. Or, yeah, that was the last one. Oh, here's the last one.
The allegations that some of the party senior members are facing. We just want you to respond to that question. As we go to elections, you don't feel that there is dent in the party. Thank you.
There is what?
Anything the image of the party going to the elections.
Yeah, no, we are a panel. We will answer all the questions, including that one.
Yeah, okay. Let me start with singing from the same hymn sheet. No, I don't think there's any misunderstanding amongst us in terms of this issue. Let me just give you an example. The Secretary General talks about nationalization of the Reserve Bank. The President talks about monetary policy. Those are, and independence in terms of operational independence. The media says conflict. No, I didn't use the word economic literacy. I was saying I borrowed from him. Right? Because you yourself are constructing this difference in the hymn sheet, because somebody is talking about nationalization, which is of ownership, which is a distinct issue, and somebody talking about operational independence, which is a distinct issue. So you construct this difference. There's no difference amongst ourselves. In terms of reconfiguring an alliance, I know I'm trying next door people. We told you that's not our purpose here. Okay? That's not our purpose. I'm being honest to you. I don't want to mislead you and the public, because that discussion takes place at a level called the Alliance Political Council. None of us are members of that meeting. No. Let me just say, it does not. It does not affect. Let me just tell you why. It has not affected the operations of the alliance. I'm telling you now, insofar as it comes to restructuring of state-owned enterprise, for instance, that discussion has taken place amongst all of us. Some of us who are involved in that were called in as part of those discussions. It does not affect it. So there's this creation that there's this fight amongst ourselves on that issue. So I try to explain this issue. Insofar as e-tolls are concerned, what is the reality? And we've got to deal with reality. The reality is that people in Gauteng have refused to pay for the e-tolls, and the Gauteng comrades and government have taken a stance on that regard. So they'll be debating, to my knowledge, with the president, I'm not privy to the details, that something needs to be done. The Gauteng province are not going to say, let's not service that debt. There's debt that has been incurred in constructing the roads. So they're not saying, let's not service that debt. From the finance minister's perspective, I would do the same thing. I would say, I hear what all of you guys are telling, unless you're not giving a formula how to service the debt, there may be sounding a disagreement between these two. It does not. Right? So, from the finance minister, he also went further and said, we've got to create the culture of payment, because this thing was not only going to be the e-toll. Tomorrow there's going to be another user and another service which we do, which we're going to require that the user pays. He then says, guys, let's go back. We are the ones who created the culture of non-payment. That's why he called people in parliament by name. So that's my understanding of what the Minister of Finance is saying. On the NDP, Eric, I can say with confidence, unless you have resigned, I can say comrade, because you used to be a member of a branch in Khubusana region. I don't know now.
Let's not compromise the
Okay. But I must say, the infrastructure issue has been a problem. A number of the serious companies in the construction industry have been negatively affected. Key big ones, for instance, Basel Rate has gone on business rescue, Liviro has gone on business rescue. So that has had serious impact on the construction industry. Government has got to do something by stimulating the infrastructure. No, to save those companies, but to, mind you, construction is a major labor-absorbing industry. And if you look at the size in terms of GDP, it is equal to mining in terms of 3.8. But in terms of, not mining, what is this sector? I can't remember now. But it's 3.8 together with another sector. But in terms of employment generation, construction is far higher. So it's an important sector which we are making the commitments that in this commitment we're making, there are a couple of things. We're committing funds. We're committing institutional capacity. 165 million is being placed aside to ensure that there's institutional capacity to deliver. So it's not only to deliver, but also the institutional capacity to be able to deliver. That's what is going to come. Let me comment on this thing, Samken, of this relation between Patrice and Tsipe and some of these things. I think, guys, you're overplaying this thing. And it's basically personalizing on the individual to the extreme. And just give an example. I go to the ANC to discuss IPPs and debate with Kosatu and Ivan Jim. Midstream, Koli throws something they say they got from BLF. What does this thing from BLF say? It says the company, I can't remember the name, the Italian company, they said it's contracted. It turns out after when I investigate, it's not contracted, it's volunteered. The Italian company that has volunteered is linked to Shanduga, is linked to Pembani, and so on and so on. Now, if you told me before I went into the studio, asked me that you're going to ask me that question, I would have done a couple of telephone calls to get the information. After the discussion, somebody throws out in Twitter an answer by a minister in Parliament who owns what. There's a list on Twitter. Who owns which company? A minister answered each of these IPPs. There's absolutely no truth in that. It's fake news. A media house such as ANC continue to publish this fake news. We are being unfair. There's absolutely no substance. Go and look into it. A relationship between, but that's the first thing. The second thing, the IPPs did not start with round 4. Before Jeff signs window 4. There's been window 1, window 2, window 3, long before Jeff. Long before Jeff. What you are trying to do is to actually personalize an issue of national importance, because what the debate is about, a couple of issues in this debate. The debate is about how do we transition to a low-carbon economy, and secondly, what is going to be the generation mix in South Africa moving forward, and what are the implications on the end state of Eskom? I think it's going to answer that question. But I was answering the participants' thing. People are spreading this lie, and media houses that are big like yourself, I got who's BLF? They are going to the studio, they say this is what BLF says. After leaving the studio, I look at this thing, this relationship with BLF and these companies. There's absolutely, between Ian, whatever that company is, and Patrice Service company, absolutely no relationship. I only got to know, but somebody who was listening to that interview in ANC in South Africa has got that belief. That's wrong. That's wrong. I wanted to deal with that, and then you can take and the 3 others and allegations.
Thank you, Comrade Enoch. I requested Comrade Dakota to allow me to respond so that I can leave. I'm going to Mpumalanga. We've got a program there in remembrance of the former chairperson of the Youth League, in Mpumalanga. I think there's only one question. Comrade Enoch to add. Comrade Jeff had a press conference this morning. I think it will further help Mr. Masego in terms of those answers. Masego is saying we are very coy about this thing of communal land. We are not. The only difficulty or challenge or misconception in society is that communal land is the land under Ngonyama Trust. There is communal land in most of the former Bantu states in South Africa or most of the rural areas. So if we want to resolve the challenge of communal land in rural areas, we need to have a legislation that is going to regulate all communal land in the country. And that includes the land under Ngonyama Trust. So the high-level panel has made some creative recommendations in terms of how we can handle the communal land in terms of a kind of registration system. Because today the kind of land ownership or land rights in the rural areas, you cannot register it in the deeds office. The deeds office can only register a title deed. And that's why maybe there is in society an understanding that the only secured right of ownership of any land is a title deed. And it's not the only secured right. In many countries, it has been proven that you cannot have one single system of land ownership and you succeed in terms of how land should be handled. Even China is sometimes misconceptualized as a one land ownership system. It's not true. In China, the land is owned by the state. It's also owned by communal collectives in the communities. And even now, in 2004, China has passed a constitution which is gravitating towards recognition of certain private property rights. And during the period of Deng Xiaoping in China, when China was modernizing, they have also made sure that foreign direct investors have got a particular dispensation that protects the land rights of the investors. So there's no country in the world which has got one single ownership system which is enabling economic participation and resolving some of the social challenges in its own country, which we are told we must do in this country. And if we then do it, like nationalization of the whole land is going to be a silver bullet to resolve the land question in South Africa. We have done the kind of custodianship in minerals. We have done the kind of custodianship in water. But it doesn't resolve the equitable access to the water challenges in the country. And also, it does not automatically transform the mineral sector. Mr. Duma there always speaks about how he believes we can use BEE to resolve the national BEE legislation to resolve some of the contested issues in the mining sector. So it tells you that putting custodianship in the minerals to the state does not resolve the transformation challenges in the sector, as it is being purported that if we just wake up and nationalize the land, all black South Africans will have access to the land. It's a misnomer. It's not going to happen. So we need to provide a solution that will enable people to have equitable access to the land. And in that regard, with regard to communal land, the Department of Rural Development is in a process of crafting legislation that will holistically regulate all communal land, and that will give a secured right for all landowners in the rural areas. And the issue of a title deed is not the only panacea that can resolve the land question in the communal area, because the communal areas, unlike other areas where we already have private ownership, it's a unique social construction. There are identity issues, there are issues in the community, cultural issues, and so forth. So when you regulate that land, you will need to take into cognizance the cultural practices and the social standing and the construct of that society. So it is for that reason that we are looking at creative ways that is going to ensure that there is secured right for the communal landowners, because one only title deed might end up with unintended consequences, what Comrade Enoch is talking about. There might be instances where a title deed can work in certain communal areas, but there will be instances where it might not work. So the recommendations with regard to that is what the department is currently looking at into crafting a communal land regulation that will enable us to resolve the issue of the security of land ownership in the communal areas. Thank you very much, Comrade Dakota. I request to leave. If there are any further questions, you can call me.
No problem, Comrade Lamola.
Thank you.
I think the issue of Patrick Motsepe, he answered that, right?
Patrice.
Is it Patrice? Patrice, yeah. Patrice Motsepe answered these allegations, and I don't think they belong here because it's about the right of an individual to conduct business in South Africa, and I think that has been addressed. Just on, I was drawing lessons from the telecom sector. Today, as we speak, you are enjoying Wi-Fi if you are in the connected areas and so on. That's competition. That is infrastructure competition. There are about 35 players that are playing that space. Has it killed telecom? No. It doesn't kill the natural monopoly. So if you say there are IPPs, they are there, but they are not going to kill ESCOM. Right? What is important is a clear regulatory framework so that there is a regulation. You can't have competition without regulation. Certainly, we don't believe in that. We don't believe in, the market can regulate itself and all that, right? So when you talk about generation, there is competition. It might still be small, right? ESCOM is a big player. It will continue to exist, and for our national interest, ESCOM must continue to exist and be a strong player in the generation space. Let me give you an example about transmission. If I am to roll an optic fiber from here to Nelspruit, I have to dig the ground, right? Either I dig the ground or I use satellite or some wireless communication. Those big transmission infrastructure of those pylons of ESCOM, you can overnight roll out a big pipe, a big optic fiber to Nelspruit from Johannesburg, to Cape Town, to any other city. When we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, one of the things that we have to do is to focus on infrastructure. I had the question about infrastructure. We always talk, when we think infrastructure, we think about construction. In the ICT space, there is an opportunity for the telco operators in the infrastructure space to work with ESCOM. But when you knock at the door of ESCOM, you need to find the right person that can talk to you. Not somebody who's focused on generation. Somebody in transmission will say, let's roll out an optic fiber cable from here to Nelspruit or to Cape Town overnight without digging the roads and all that, right? So the connectivities of cities is also the responsibility of somebody at ESCOM. They must start thinking like that. That is what I was talking about bringing everything else together. Because we are one country, we have national objectives, and all players, infrastructure players, in all these sectors must come together and we find solutions and so on. The distribution one, I've already raised it. The municipalities are involved in distribution. Let me tell you something. If you are a resident of Johannesburg, maybe it's not happening under Mashaba that much, right? If you don't pay your bill, somebody sends a reminder, hey, you must pay, right? If you don't pay within 30 days, they cut you off. During the ANC government here in Joburg, and that is why I think Joburg is really suffering in collecting revenue. The ANC government used to cut you if you're not paying. We used to be affected, you forget to pay your bill, they come and cut you, right? There is a specific focus on getting money from the consumer for what they have used. ESCOM has got no capacity to be knocking at your door and generating that bill, because mainly it's mainly an engineering company. It's all about generation. Don't talk to the engineer about customer facing these things, right? So when you talk about unbundling, like I'm saying, it has happened before. It is continuing to happen. Comrade Enoch talked about unbundling, not as a new idea that comes because of there are elections, right? We can afford to be populist as the ANC, right? There has to be a continuation of our policies. Where we've made mistakes, we're able to admit that we've made mistakes. And we are singing from the same hymn book. That hymn book, right, is our own policies. If there is a point of emphasis in as far as the left is concerned of the ANC or the center, I don't know where Comrade belongs, right? But historically it's the left, right? Social Democrats, right? So what I'm saying is that I think there is a debate. Right? There is a debate that is necessary in as far as ESCOM's future is concerned. We can't afford to fold our arms. That is not an option because you will have seen with these blackouts and so on. And I have my own views about the blackouts, but I'm not going to talk about them now. So, generally speaking, the issue of infrastructure in our sector, for instance, we are talking about once we license the spectrum, we are talking about 100 billion. That is just going to be released. They were going for auction, and we are going for the one. The one is going to be given opportunity for SMMEs and black economic empowerment partners to play, right? But the existing players are facing competition. Competition is healthy if it is well regulated. That is our position. And then lastly, and I was whispering with Comrade Lindworth and said, I think South Africans must get into, especially our friends in the media, right? Let's get used to a debate. The ANC is not the South African Communist Party. It is not COSATU, right? Our objectives, right, broadly speaking, right, we have one common national interest to ensure that there is development and all that, but there are points of emphasis where we will differ. COSATU will talk about safeguarding jobs. We will say, let's safeguard jobs, but let's also create jobs. Is our mandate. The Communist Party can talk about the issues affecting the left. They might put an emphasis there, but it does not mean that there is conflict between these three parties that are in alliance. We're in alliance because of national objectives, and we must get used to that fact that from time to time there will be differences of emphasis, but generally speaking, our boats are sailing in the same direction.
Just one minor issue. Just for pure references, in future, when you ask about these bids, there was a question asked in Parliament by the member of the EFF, Mr. Dlamini, to the Minister of Energy. And in that, the Minister of Energy listed all shareholders from bid 1 to bid 4. So it's a public available document. It's going to be quite important when we debate on the basis of substantive information which is available in the public, rather than kind of conspiracy theory.
I just wanted to say very briefly on the infrastructure issue that I think the question is absolutely right about the critical importance of infrastructure spending and development for job creation and for economic development. And indeed, we have that experience. In 2012, the thing called the commodity super cycle ended. Mineral prices fell, and many peer economies, such as Brazil, for example, went into recession, and we did not. And what I think, on the basis of analysis that has been done subsequently, what saved us was the infrastructure build program that happened. So the infrastructure program is of critical importance to generating economic activity. I think that we would have to say that the target for infrastructure spend in this 5 years is just going to end in 2.5 months' time, was 1 trillion rand over that period of time, which was a significant increase over the period before. And I think we would have to acknowledge that in the last few years it has not been up to scratch and up to target, and that has had a number of factors underlying it, but some of them have included that the state of the state-owned companies and the problems of governance and all the other issues that have been identified under the rubric of state capture and corruption. So I think that's definitely the case. But the manifesto says two things. It says, first of all, there'll be the establishment of an infrastructure fund. There were announcements on that already in the budget. And the second thing it says is it will strengthen the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission to achieve much greater results of coordination. I think that is work in progress. That is happening right now within government. I just want to refer to the document that you've all got, because it says that we are committing to spending 865 billion rand over the next 3 years. Now, if you translate that into 5 years, that would be 1.4 trillion. That's actually a bigger amount than the target for this 5 years. It then goes on to say, it says something very, very important. It says that 39% of the 865 billion, in other words, 339 billion rand, will have to come from the state-owned companies. And then other percentages from provincial government, local government, and so on. And that, I think, underscores the point that what has to happen is the state-owned companies got to be put right, not just got rid of or forget about them, let them go to hell because they've got challenges right now. That's why the hard work of governance is to put these state-owned companies right, because their investments in the 39% of the infrastructure that we're talking about over the next 3 years is of critical strategic importance. And it's part of the idea that's also included in the documents. And I think it's one of the, if you like, the conceptual or philosophical differences between the ANC and some of the other parties, is that government needs to play catalytic actions. Its interventions are important in the economy. It's not that we just can abandon this terrain and hope that somebody's going to do it for us. We actually have to do our bit, and our bit includes making the infrastructure build program work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Rob. On the allegations and how they affect the party, I think we need to reiterate, firstly, the policy position of the African National Congress related to gender-based violence. As the African National Congress, more than 65 years ago, first amongst its peers in the world, we took a policy position of non-sexism that would want to build a society with a character of a non-sexist society. By this we meant dealing with the challenges of triple oppression of women in society, at work and elsewhere, dealing with gender imparities which are there in society, including poor gender relations, dealing with the marginalization of people based on their sexual orientation, be them gays or lesbians, LGBTQI. It's our policy position as the ANC, dealing with the problems of gender-based violence, particularly committed against women and children in our society. Now, it's a matter of concern for the African National Congress that, again, the allegations which are brought against one of our leaders. So far, the victim came to present her complaint in Luthuli House. She was advised by Luthuli House, the African National Congress, that we do not have the mandate to investigate. We do not have the mandate to prosecute. The best for her would be to approach the law enforcement agencies to ensure that this matter is properly processed within the rule of law, is properly processed within the constitutional ambits of the country, where both the rights of the victim and the accused will be respected. So we do not have a mandate as the ANC either to be a police station or a magistrate court. That's how we advise them. So these particular allegations are very serious because it's an antithesis of what we stand for as the African National Congress, where in a country which we lead and a governing party, there's a serious endemic problem of gender-based violence committed against women and children. We take these allegations very serious, and I'm sure we can make decisions once the matter is properly processed through our structures For now, there's no decision. Comrade who's alleged to have committed this horrendous act is still our leader, is still in office. We will be in a position to come with a position once the matter is properly processed through our structures. But for now, we would respect the rights of both of them.
Yeah, can I just make an appeal, colleagues, now as head of communication, that let's respect what is the practice, right? When there is an allegation of this nature, names of people are not disclosed until they appear in court. Why is it that it does not apply here? So it's very important. No, it's very important, because otherwise I will then send an SMS out and say so and so has done this thing, right? And we then don't respect that protocol that has been established in the country. And that's all what I'm appealing for, that I think we need to be very, very careful here. Because if somebody can throw any news out there, the temptation is to just name that person. If later on it is discovered that it is not the truth, the damage on individuals and their families is quite huge. So the protocol that has been established in how people who are charged with criminal acts, right? That is why Luthuli House says go to the police, so that you can we can address that issue there. But this is not a press conference for that issue. It's something that as the days evolve, maybe these issues will better be addressed, but not at this press conference, because we're talking about the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Nkenke. Yeah, just on ESCOM, there are three principles that we have set for the process going forward as the African National Congress. That there will be no privatization as a matter of principle. There will be no burdening of the end user, which is the consumer, in terms of price or electricity tariff. There will be no workers who will be casualties as a result of the unbundling or whatever processes of restructuring in the ESCOM. So that is basically the principles that we have set for the process. And I'm sure all of you are aware, the President has reiterated the position of the ANC, even in Parliament, when he was asked on this particular matter, that there will be no privatization. So we stand by our words, and we stand by our position as the African National Congress. Let me take this opportunity on behalf of my Chair of Communications, Comrade Nkenke Kana, and the Chair of the Subcommittee on Economic Transformation, and on behalf of President Cyril Ramaphosa, in absentia, our